Here is a 5-minute profile of the lamb variety of avocado tree. Lamb is also called lamb Hass because it's a distant relative of the Hass variety. Lamb is a seedling of Gwen, Gwen is a seedling of Phil, and Phil is a seedling of Hass. So that's its pedigree. This particular lamb tree in my yard here in San Diego County is 5.5 years old, and it's about 8 feet tall, maybe 6 feet wide. Let's have a look inside at the fruit. So I'm taking this video at the very end of January, and lambs are not mature at the end of January. They're actually basically a summer fruit. So you might start eating them in June or even a little bit later, and they get tastier and tastier through the late summer into the fall. They also turn black. The skin turns black when it's mature, just like a Hass. And one nice thing about the way that lamb sets its fruit is most of the fruit is pretty well covered by foliage on the outside. It sets on the interior of the tree, which is handy because it protects the fruit from sunburn. So that's a nice thing about the way lamb bears its fruit. Also, in terms of tree architecture, the form of a lamb tree is generally upright growing, kind of narrow, and not so spreading like some other varieties, like say much different than Fuerte, for example. And so that allowed me to plant this lamb just 7.5 feet from another tree. This tree to its left is a reed. They're pretty close together, and in fact they're pretty much touching at this point, which would make a nice cross-pollination opportunity. Although it's true that both varieties are A types, meaning the flowers are usually male and female at about the same time. It doesn't really matter with lamb nor with reed because they both set good crops by themselves. So if you had a lone lamb tree in your yard, it's going to set a good crop. You don't need a B-type pollinizer for that. Having a closer look at the foliage, you see that it looks pretty good here in late January, which is generally when avocado trees look their worst in Southern California because of the chloride leaf burn that happens. But this tree's foliage looks pretty good. On the other hand, let me take you quickly to my Hass tree nearby, which looks a lot worse, you'll see. Here's the foliage of the Hass. Look at all the tip burn. And this pattern is the same every year. Hass has a lot more sensitivity to the salts in the water than lamb. So back at the lamb, you'll notice that the leaves have kind of a taco shape. They're not the prettiest looking things, but one thing that is tough and that I appreciate about the lamb that I experienced this last summer, July of 2018, was that it took the extreme heat we had pretty well. Even though it got up to 117 where I'm at, it still kept a decent crop of fruit on the tree, and that's much better than most of my trees. And so I appreciate that. One quirk about lamb, though, just to be aware if you're going to grow it, is that in its first few years in the ground, it tends to drop a lot of leaves when it flowers in the spring, and it also tends to drop a lot of its fruit in the spring, just before the fruit tastes really good. But don't worry, it grows out of that habit and it fruits well, and maybe you'd like to grow one in your yard. That's my 5-minute profile of the lamb avocado.